Hello, this is Devin, the presenter in this video. A little disclaimer for this presentation and also advice if you are presenting at the HTCC conference. I do get cut off near the end of my presentation by the moderator. This was a somewhat hostile audience. They put me in a room, the anthropology room, and I was not supposed to be in the anthropology room, but they read my title and thought anthropology. So yeah, the audience was not prepared for what I was about to say. There's also a fairly racist comment that happens at the end. It's a bizarre racist comment, but it is racist nonetheless. So if that bothers you, I would just stop the video before that happens. It's at the very end. But this is the second time I have gotten cut off at an HTCC conference. And yes, I did go over time, but over the past 2 years going to these conferences, I have never seen anyone else ever be cut off by the moderators, even if they are going 10 or 15 or sometimes, 20 minutes over, it feels like. So the conclusion I've come to, and it's something that if you're going to present at these conferences, you need to reconcile with too, is if your research is novel, it's unique, it's your own research that you came up with that's never been done before, and that simultaneously that research challenges the status quo, possibly challenges people's belief structures, and it's hard for them to hear, they may cut you off. So just keep that in mind. I think I'm more annoyed at the limits of the human condition than anything else. Keep in mind, before this, I was literally coaching the moderator on how to moderate. He didn't know what he was doing. We wasted 15 minutes because of that. I was also, 15 minutes that ate up everybody's time. I also was doing tech support because one of the presenters brought the incorrect USB for these monitors. And so I was like, that's not going to work. So then she had to get on the internet. So I was just remedying everybody's ineptitude, and I'm not getting paid. I'm not a professor or faculty. These people are complete strangers to me. So that's sort of what this presentation was going into. I was helping everybody. We were cracking jokes, having fun, and then people just become hostile and uncomfortable. So I'm more annoyed with the limits of the human condition. Now, what I was presenting on were facts, historical facts as we know them. Yes, they were marred in my own narrativization and therefore my own biases, but that is the case in all things humans do, is it not? I also did not claim anything. I presented a few theories on why this event may have occurred and let the audience decide. And yes, I saw a lot of crosses around people's necks in that room, so I was aware of the possibility of hostility towards my research and presentation. When I presented on the Iraq War in my last HTCC conference, from, I would say, an explicitly anti-colonial perspective, I was very aware that there may have been people who were in support of the U.S. invasion of Iraq in that room. So when you are talking about these topics, keep in mind, you're presenting to an older audience, maybe a more conservative audience, dare I say, and so they may not be as open to your research. And also keep in mind that the HTCC conference is heavily STEM focused. And those of you who were there may say, well, Devin, you won an award. Yes, I won an award, not for my research though, but instead for being an exemplary participant in my college's honors program, for being honor society president, for helping dozens of my peers, for giving back to my community. Everyone who won an award relating to their abstract or research was from the STEM field. Everyone at this conference. And, let's call a spade a spade. Scientists are much more conservative and closed-minded when it comes to the humanities. They don't study this stuff. This is just what I observe, okay? This is what I've observed in academia. So and there's a lot of STEM folks at the HTCC conference. I've been cut off twice, so I'm just making the connections, okay? All right. And I've noticed at other conferences, for example, my district's college, where there's less STEM folks, I notice people are far more open to ideas which challenge the status quo, challenge traditional narratives, and ultimately question what it means to be human. So, with all that said, if you're presenting at the HTCC conference on something new, something radical that may possibly challenge people's beliefs, do not be discouraged or allow yourself to falter because your audience is hostile to you. As long as you are presenting facts in a just manner, you should have the conviction to move forward. You should have the spiritedness, the passion, and a trust not only in your research, but yourself. And when you do this, you will notice, in spite of the hostility that you may get, people in the audience, complete strangers, will literally record and photograph your presentation for their own personal use if your research is that good. That has happened to me twice now, and I haven't seen it happen to anybody else. So if your research is that good, despite all the hostility, people in the room are going to like it. And yes, if hostility comes your way, you are also allowed to assert yourself and show that you are visibly annoyed. It is within your rights. You are only human. Don't bottle up all that energy inside. People need to see that you're annoyed, and that's like not okay to do, right? So with that said, don't be nervous if you're presenting at the next conference. Study your material, take up space, have presence, bring a USB Type A flash drive, and please, for the love of all things holy, don't just stand there and read your essay. It's so boring. Just please don't. Anyways, with all that said, please enjoy my presentation. There was some static in the original audio, which I have had to remove most of it post-editing, but it left the final product with a little lower audio quality at some points. So I apologize for that, but enjoy. So initially, when I was looking at the roster, I'm like, why did they put me in the room with all the anthropologists and all that stuff? And then my mom was like, well, they read anthropophagic, and so they thought, oh, anthropology. And that's not what anthropophagic means. That is a mythologized cannibalism or a mythological embrace of cannibalism. So yes, we will be talking about cannibalism today, unfortunately. Now, many will ask, right, when we're discussing history, many students will say, why do we care? Why do we care about history? Why does it matter? And especially why does the Crusades matter? Because this is something that will be brushed over if you take an American high school history course or you go to seminary. Sometimes they will brush over it because it's usually an embarrassing, time in history. But one could argue that we are perhaps living in a new crusade, right? When Bush was invading Iraq, he would not read any war documents unless it had a biblical verse on it. He just refused to read it. So his people had to put a biblical verse on it. Our new national defense guy, Pete Hegseth, he's got a Jerusalem cross on his chest. He has Deus Vult on his bicep. God wills it. A common phrase during the Crusades. And now he's got a new tattoo, infidel, written in Arabic, which, whatever floats your boat, man. But, and you can also make the argument that Muslims today are one of the most oppressed groups in the world. Whether it's Uyghurs in China, the Rohingya in Myanmar, Indian Muslims oppressed by the Hindutva, Kashmiris oppressed, and the US-backed genocides in Yemen and Palestine. So one could make that argument that we are seeing a new crusade, which is very scary to think about. So, what were the Crusades? Who were the Crusaders? Which is what we will be specifically looking at. Who were these people? Well, Crusaders, generally who's attributed to it is the Franks, the Frankish Crusaders in the First Crusade. Now, the majority of Franks were not actually Franks. They were Normans, or Northmen, or Norsemen. See how it goes? Language never changes, right? The Norsemen, or Northmen, or Normans, what we think of today as Vikings. And these were the Kievan Rus, the Rus Vikings, the Vikings in Scandinavia. And up in the north, they hit a population threshold, and they had to start coming down south, and they did it through invasions. And so, over time, they would continuously invade France. This was Rollo and his posse of Scandinavian Vikings. And he won some battles, and he lost some battles. But the French were eventually just like, okay, can you stop attacking us? We'll give you territory, you know? So they gave Rollo and the Vikings the Duchy of Normandy, which is here in the south, which would be the north of France, but south of this map. And of course, the Norman Empire will continue down south of France and up to the north. The Normans, as Vikings, were usually commissioned by other European kingdoms as mercenaries. So you will see that you'll have Italio-Normans fighting in Italy. You'll have Anglo-Normans in England, and so these different ethnic groups spread. You have Normans in Spain and Sicily who convert to Islam, and they become Muslim, and they Arabize themselves. So these are, who the Normans are, and then, of course, the Crusades. And so that is what we need to recognize when we are talking about the First Crusade and the Frankish armies of the Crusade. The military leaders of the Crusade were either Normans themselves or married to Normans. And what you see in Normandy at the time is Rollo and his posse and the generations that came after, they were overseeing French people. So these people weren't Normans. They didn't speak Old Norse. They spoke Old French. They were Catholics. So Rollo and the Vikings, they start assimilating. And this new cultural identity emerges, right? And there's a cultural mixture of being French, being Norse. There's religious syncretism, a blend of Norse paganism and Roman Catholicism. And so as they're going on this crusade, they are not entirely Christian, It hasn't fully developed. And there's dangers in the emergence of new identities, which is what we'll talk about. The defenders of the crusade, it's always hard finding images of Islamic leaders because, people were not drawing and things like that of people all the time. But this is Kilij Arslan the First. He is the Sultanate of the Rum Seljuks. So essentially what happened was the Turks came in and conquered the vast Arab Empire, which was the largest at the time in human history. It stretched from the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, to Central South Asia, Pakistan. And the Seljuk Turks came in and they conquered it, and there was a divergence of kingdoms. One of these kingdoms was the Sultanate of Rum. Rum was just Rome. And what happened was, in the first battle with the Romans, it was a humiliating defeat from the Romans. It was the first time Rome ever had a commander captured in their entire history. But the Turks became obsessed with the Romans. And so they called themselves the Rum Sultanate, the Roman Sultanate. And their explicit goal was to Islamicize Rome, to conquer Rome. And they would eventually succeed. In 1453, under Ottoman dynastic rule, they would conquer the Roman Empire. So that is one of our key players who defended against the Crusades. And then we'll also talk about Yagisian, who's the governor of Antioch, which will be the start of things. But the Prince's Crusade, which is what we think of, those noblemen that you saw before, who are Normans or married to Normans, they Pope Urban II and Alexios Komnenos would call a crusade, and they would go to arms with their Norman buddies. And one of the first they would encounter would be the Sultanate of Rum. And Kilish Arslan, he was not really worried about the Crusaders. He was fighting another battle in the east with another empire. And so when the Crusaders came, number one, he was not completely dedicated to defending them off. Number two, the Crusader use of plate armor against low poundage cavalry and slashing type maneuvers prolonged the battle. This is the Battle of Dilium, which the Crusaders were losing, but then Raymond will come in with reinforcements, and he saves the Crusader army, and Kilish Arslan leaves. He's like, I'm not doing this. And this basically gave them complete, just, they were not stopped on their way to Antioch, Syria. And so they will get to Antioch, Syria, and they will set up a siege. This siege will last for 8 months. They will hunt the entire grounds of Syria, take all the food, and essentially these crusaders will starve themselves. And Yagisian, he will send spies out, and these spies will come back and report that these crusaders are starting to eat people. They're starving. And this is very terrifying to the people of Antioch. Now, did that actually happen, or was that hyperbole? Who knows in that circumstance, but it's very plausible. Antioch was not going to be defeated. They were lasting for 8 months. They could have lasted way longer. But what happens is Fairuz, who is a convert to Islam, he is fined for black market dealing by Yagisian. He's originally Armenian Orthodox Christian. He comes to Islam. He is fined by Yagisian, and in an act of revenge, he, with a rope, brings up 500 crusaders in to the castle through a window which he had overlooking the citadel of Antioch, or the city. And the crusaders in Antioch, they just completely massacre the entire city, which is very shocking to people who were safe up in the citadel, Yagisian, and who he actually ran in an act of cowardice, and then he dies, but his son overlooking. It's shocking. Why would you kill a city? You want to conquer a city. Why would you kill everybody? Cannibalism does not occur in this event. What happens is they conquer Antioch, and Raymond and his contingents and other military commanders, they will march to Ma'ara, which is a city, you could see it there, a little bit southern. And it's a very much smaller city, a population of 10,000. And they will siege Antioch for 2 weeks. Or they will siege Ma'ara for 2 weeks. Ma'ara only had an urban militia. So they didn't have a really sophisticated military, but they did a very good job of pushing back these crusaders. But eventually the crusaders will come in, and the people were hiding up in one of the large buildings, and Bohemond and Raymond will say, hey, if you come out, we will not kill you. If everybody comes out, you will all be fine. You will all be, okay. And so everybody comes out of this hiding place, the citadel in Ma'ara, and immediately, for 3 days, the crusaders begin slaughtering the inhabitants of Ma'ara. And this is Ralph of Caen. He was an eyewitness to the event up there. He's a Frankish chronicler and a Norman chaplain for Bohemond, one of the military commanders. He says, in Ma'ara, our troops boiled the pagan adults in cooking pots. They impaled children on spits and devoured them grilled. So this is one of the things they did, which is a very shocking event to do. And what you'll see in Frankish accounts and Western accounts is there is a quasi-historical narrative that, no, we did not actually do this. It was the Tarfurs who did this. The Tarfuras were followers of Peter the Hermit, the People's Crusade, and they were a peasantry who would follow around, the noble crusader knights, as the myth goes. And so, in Frankish ahistorical narratives, they will say, it is the cruel necessity that we had to do of feeding our army upon the bodies of the Saracens, the Arabs, which is, of course, not the case, and I'll prove it to you. Mada was a very opulent, wealthy city. It was a population of 10,000, and it was actually an exporter of food to Damascus and other Syrian provinces. And you can see here, it had from travelers who would come through, Arabic travelers, Persian travelers, they would say it had arable land, it was plentiful, and it was opulent with all very good things. So there was no reason to eat the Arabs and the population of Ma'ada. And secondly, months after this event, crusaders would go around saying how they are going to eat Arabs, how they would hunt down Arabs, and they did so. It did occur months after. So it was a form of terror. Now, there's a couple reasons that this could have happened. When I was doing my research, I'm like, well, why did this happen? I wanted to get down to it. It could have just been, yes, a tactic of terror to eat people, but it's possible that there was cultural confusions between the Norse pagans and their assimilation with Catholicism. One of these is the Catholic Eucharist. There's obviously a symbolic eating of Christ, which is based on the concept of transference, which is the consuming of a body will give you metaphysical and physical abilities. So that's a possibility. But in the Norse sagas, the Norse myths, there are instances of cannibalism that are acceptable. So if you are doing cannibalism, drinking the blood of a stronger warrior, you may, that is acceptable, right? If you are cannibalizing as revenge against a foreigner, such as in the Lay of Atli, that is also acceptable. Essentially, Gudrun, who is brothers to the leader she's sister to the leader of the Burgundians, she will basically kill her two sons because she was forced to marry Attila the Hun, and feed them to Attila the Hun, and she will kill everybody, essentially. So these aspects in Norse mythology, these are acceptable elements of cannibalism. So it's possible that this could have occurred. There's also, when we are thinking of modern Western society, the croissant symbolizes, when you eat a croissant, the devouring of the Islamic crescent, the devouring of the Islamic world, of, essentially that.
Excuse me, Devin.
Yeah.
You're about 5 minutes over.
Okay, I'm almost, this is the last slide. So, yeah. Next time you eat a croissant, think of that. Anyways, whatever. Yeah, we're excited.
We are over time, ladies and gentlemen, but does anyone have any?
I think I just scared everybody in the room. Yeah, go ahead, Zayed. Yes. As far as I know, it mostly was centralized in Syria. If you read Turkish mythology, especially a crusader, the Christians who invaded, they are described as anthropophagy, like these mythologized cannibals. They are described as animals in a sense, and it's because of these events that occurred. So it's definitely possible that this continued onward, but there was really no reason for it to happen in the first place, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
Any other questions?
We have to go eat lunch now.
Round of applause.
OK. Au revoir. Merci beaucoup.
I'm gonna look at his leg of lamb a little bit differently, right?